Good day. Gazprom, the Russian gas export monopoly, has just announced that at 8:45 a.m. Moscow time today, Nord Stream 2, this pipeline, this gas pipeline linking Russia and Germany, which goes under the Baltic Sea and which has been the subject of so much controversy and so many battles, has finally been completed. The latest reports are that the first stream of gas will be passing through Nord Stream 2 by the 1st of October, and that gas will be arriving in Germany via Nord Stream 2 on the 1st of December. This finally completes this complex project. It has been criticised. There's been endless attempts to try to persuade Germany to drop the pipeline. There was a concerted attempt to try to get the Germans to suspend work on the pipeline last year in connection with the Navalny affair. And of course, there's been endless sanctions by the United States and more threats of sanctions by the United States. Donald Trump tried to stop the pipeline after Barack Obama basically did nothing about it. Joe Biden decided in the end that what sanctions he would impose on the pipeline would not extend to the German operators, therefore making them in effect unenforceable. In addition, American sanctions or attempted sanctions against the builders of the pipeline, specifically the Swiss company that was laying the pipes, proved ineffectual because the Russians were able to step in and complete the pipeline by themselves, as I always said they would. I would add that the pipeline could certainly have been finished earlier despite all of these sanctions. The reason it has been finished in September of this year instead of sometime last year was because the Germans themselves dragged their feet over the matter as they waited first for Donald Trump to lose the presidency and then negotiated a deal with his successor, Joe Biden. There's never been a great technical difficulties about completing the pipeline. The Russians always have the engineering skills and the technology to do it. They are, in fact, the world's leading pipeline builders. The idea that they were dependent on foreign contractors to finish it was absurd, but the Germans wanted their deal with the Americans, and in the end they got it. Now, there's been much talk, much discussion about the geopolitical implications of Nord Stream 2 and its longer-term economic implications. I've always thought that the geopolitical implications of this pipeline have been, to some extent, overstated. It's quite likely that Russian-German trade will gradually grow again, but the problem of EU sanctions stands in the way, and I have to say, I can't see any German government at the moment deciding to lift those sanctions against Russia. So that is going to act as a restraint on the growth of trade between Germany and Russia looking forward. Beyond that, it's absolutely the case that the Russians will be exporting gas to Germany and they will be bypassing the so-called transit states, Poland, Belarus, and above all Ukraine. But I have to say that the idea that the pipeline is going to change the geopolitical geography of Europe and is going to make Germany so dependent upon Russia for its energy that the Russians will be able to demand political concessions from Germany and from the EU in consequence strikes me as beyond far-fetched. Realistically, if the Russians were to try to do any such thing, all that would happen is that their relations with the Germans and with the Europeans would become even more deeply compromised, and that might indeed put in question future energy cooperation. The Russians have been able to build this pipeline and to finish the deal with Germany, precisely because they are perceived in Berlin and in most European capitals as extremely reliable gas suppliers. And that is something, an asset, that reputation for reliability is not one that the Russians are going to put in jeopardy by pursuing a whimsical policy of seeking political concessions in respect of economic cooperation. So I think the geopolitical effects of this pipeline are overstated. They are not overstated with respect to Ukraine. Now, I have to say this because, of course, there's been much discussion about this. The Canadian academic Paul Robinson has said that even with respect to Ukraine, the building of Nord Stream 2, its impact is exaggerated. Even if the Russians were to cut off all gas transit through Ukraine, Ukraine would survive, it would not collapse. That may all be true, but it is still a major blow to Ukraine itself. And of course, it emphasizes to the Ukrainians something which I think they never quite understood or accepted, which is that as far as the Europeans are concerned, Ukraine is ultimately dispensable. It's not a country they will go out of their way to make sacrifices for. Why the Ukrainians ever thought that, why they imagined that the Europeans would make sacrifices on their behalf, I have to say I've never really understood. But now they've received a lesson that support from Europe that they always imagined was there is in fact conditional always upon the Europeans pursuing their own interests. And the second thing I would say about Ukraine and the position it has found itself in is that, of course, losing its position as a transit state, which everybody expects to happen fairly soon, loses Ukraine not just some of its traction over the Europeans, but some of its value to the Europeans. One of the major reasons the Europeans were interested in Ukraine, other than ideological ones, was precisely because of Ukraine's position as a transit state and the way in which control of gas transit across Ukraine might enable the Europeans to put pressure on the Russians to open up their energy industries to European penetration. The fact that that's not going to happen anymore means that from the European point of view, the value of Ukraine has now diminished significantly. But perhaps there's another story to say, and that is that once again, what Nord Stream 2 has demonstrated is the one overriding truth about Europe, which has, by the way, been true ever since the mid-19th century. This is that the two most powerful countries in Europe by far are Germany and Russia. When the Germans and the Russians work together and decide on a joint enterprise, it gets done. There is no force in Europe, no combination of countries that can withstand them. The only situation where other countries in Europe have real leverage against either the Germans or, to a lesser extent, the Russians, is when the Germans and the Russians are in conflict with each other. The Germans and the Russians were determined to build Nord Stream 2, and therefore it got built. This despite the fact that some of the European countries which objected to the building of Nord Stream 2, like the Baltic states, Ukraine, Poland, and Britain, were able to get the United States to weigh in on their side. I think it is that fact, the fact of German-Russian cooperation and the extent to which it has the potential to dominate Europe, which is what really lies behind all the nervousness and worry about Nord Stream 2. The Europeans, and not just the Europeans, are always very nervous when they see the Russians and the Germans working together. Because when those two giants come together, no one else is strong enough to withstand them. And this always makes smaller countries, weaker countries, even countries like France and Britain and Italy, which have certainly intrinsic strengths of their own, extremely worried when the Germans and the Russians seem to be coming too close to each other. And that, I think, was ultimately the true reason for the opposition to Nord Stream 2. Ukraine and its gas transit, the fear of German dependence on Russia, the worry about diversification of energy, all that sort of thing, all the things we've been hearing so much about, all the stated reasons are not the true reasons. The true reasons is worry about German-Russian cooperation going forward. If one day the Germans and the Russians are able to move beyond economic and energy cooperation and join together to cooperate politically with each other, well, then, of course, Europe changes, and indeed the nature of Europe becomes radically different from the one it is in today. I don't think we are anywhere close to that point yet. I don't see either Berlin or Moscow prepared to take that step. The Russians have been offering the Germans all sorts of projects at various times, and they've been suggesting to the Germans that the Germans might be interested in getting involved in what the Russians call the Greater Eurasia Project, the project that will link up Russia and China and hopefully Europe together. But the Germans have shown little interest in it, and I think the German political class at the moment has little understanding of that idea. Perhaps one day that will change, but regardless, the events of the last few years with Nord Stream 2 shows the potential power of German-Russian cooperation and the way in which it might develop and change Europe. Well, thank you for this brief program on this vexed subject. I hope it'll be the last program I'm going to do on Nord Stream 2. Frankly, it's a subject which I think has been over-discussed and over-analysed by far too many people, including, I have to say, to some extent by me. Though I make the point that I was obliged to do it because of the way others have basically forced this topic on me. Well, thank you for joining me today. I look forward to you joining me again in future programs, both on this channel and on our main channel, the Duran. Please come again to please also look us up in our major new platforms, above all Locals, where we have a thriving community and are now posting exclusive content, and on SuperU, which is also growing rapidly and is a new free speech platform. Remember to go to our shop and buy the great things that you will find there. Please support us to the extent that you feel you can via Patreon and Subscribestar. Check your subscription to this channel. Tick the like button if you've liked this video. Join me again in future programs and have a wonderful day.